Okay, so let's talk about D&D. Let's talk about. You wanted to talk about this because the Player's
That's my bread and
Handbook
butter.
has seen the light of day
Yes.
this week. I haven't seen it yet. So I mean, I don't know anybody who's bought it. So.
Well, because it doesn't ship officially for another day or two. I will get my copy on Thursday. So basically, the moment Amazon releases the book, it gets sent out in the mail. So I'm expected to get mine on Thursday. I think the official release date is Wednesday. So it's about that time. Around the same time, my games show up in distribution. I find that humorous. So yes, now it should be noted that if you were at Gen Con, a bunch of people at Gen Con got preview copies early. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you have, if you talk about D&D and you've got more than 4,000 or 5,000 people, subscribers on your YouTube, you basically got a copy of this game. So there's a couple dozen I found of people online. They're doing D&D people that are giving out reviews and screenings, and their videos range from 10 minutes to 3 hours when they go into deep dives. I've seen the short ones. I'm going to see the book for myself so I can read through it myself. And this was a huge conversation topic for an interview that got posted this week on our channel, which was Faith Elizabeth Lilly, who is coming out with a system called World Tree, which is a kind of a different way of looking at a VTT and community-based online gaming. And there's a couple of things that happened from the course of that interview, which made me feel a lot better. And then when I was doing research, the first thing is there are still people who insist on calling it 5.5. There are still people who want to calling it 6th edition. Just call it 6th edition. Not that now that rules have been coming out more often, the idea of calling it 6th edition is no longer accurate. It's not even close. I would even range to say it's barely even 5.5. It's closer to 5.25. I don't really, because ultimately, and this is the one thing that I found out talking with people and also looking at these videos, the biggest shock about this book is how little actually changed. The book is quite large. It's the largest player's handbook that they've made up to this point. The book has primarily been written to attract new gamers. So someone says, do I need this book? And some people said, if you play D&D and you are faithfully play D&D, you may not need to even buy this book, because the thing about the 2024, they want to call it D&D 2024. And then people are saying, we're just going to call it 5.5. And eventually at some point, someone's going to win that argument. I don't really like calling editions by their year. It's like when they used to say something was 2000. I'm like, yeah, well, that was 25 years ago. It was in the future when it was in the 80s. And now, you know, I remember watching a show.
It's given them an element of obsolescence that it really doesn't age very well.
So anyway, calling it D&D 2024, which is what their desire is that it spends a good chunk of its rules, of its initial page count, teaching people what D&D is in a way that hasn't been before, by going into huge, huge details. And the person said, if you're a GM, you can skip this book because it's not telling you in any way how to play. The rules are exactly the same. All it's done was give more variety to player usage. Now, that's not exactly true. There are certain things which I feel is, if you're a game designer, you have to be aware of. These are things that I've been, I don't say aware of, but cognizantly interested in doing to D&D. The first one is they have pushed, obviously races are gone. The idea of races have been removed. We have now species. Now, it should be noted that I have been playing around with calling it species and origin for the last part of 4 or 5 years. So it's been something that has been basically embraced by the community anyway. D&D is basically just finally jumping on the bandwagon. They have removed the ability to score bonuses from species and put it to backgrounds. I have also done this, but I actually do it both. I say basically you can get your ability score bonus from your species selection or from your background selection. You can't have both, but you get to choose which one. They are putting it entirely in the background option, which I think, once again, if they want to give people more variety, give them that variety to choose between species, biological benefits, and cultural, discipline benefits, which is from your background. However, they have drastically trimmed what backgrounds are. They want to give people a lot of backgrounds, but they then removed a lot of the eccentricities of backgrounds. For example, you remember these would say like motivation, your idol, what you cherish, all those tables that backgrounds have, all gone. Background entries are now way smaller.
Okay.
And species selection is not nearly as important as they used to. But they also give all players a feat at first level, which are called origin feats. So in my opinion, what they have done, they've taken the, I'll say for ease of sakes, the race, background, and the race and background selection, and then they split it and move some things around. So now you get to have complete variety. So you can pick your background gives you stuff, your feat gives you stuff, and your race gives you stuff. In the old days, you would probably get all of that from those 2 selections. Now you get it from 3 selections, which gives you a lot more variety. Now, it should be noted that the question is, does that make first level characters slightly more powerful? And I do believe the consensus is yes. I think first level characters are just marginally more powerful at first level, which is hilarious because I used to make a disclaimer that my ultramodern game, the characters were slightly more powerful at first level than fantasy. So if this is true, then it's entirely possible that ultramodern by a complete side effect has now balanced itself with D&D 2024. So someone says, hey, in your game, you say if you don't use the ladder system in ultramodern for your fantasy characters, then no one should use ladders. And I'm thinking, no, go ahead now, because you can intermix ladders left and right, because that origin feat is the same as your ladder first level ability, which means they balance each other out, which is great, because I was always worrying that D&D 2024 would render ultramodern obsolete. It might actually have made ultramodern more topical. And then they have classes, and in classes they have exploded. The classes are huge when it comes to your variety. 4 subclasses now, a lot more variety. The spell chapter somehow has managed to get even larger. They have added so many new spells, because remember, they have Tasha's and Guide of Everything, Xanthos Guide of Everything. They've taken all the best bits of those books and dropped them in the 2024 book. So not only does it have way more spells than you should ever possibly need, it also has a bunch of monsters and a bunch of that as well. With people saying the problem is that players will generally go with what they know. So if you're an experienced player, you're like, no, I'm just going to do my two weapon fighting. I'm going to grab my weapons and I'm going to go into the game. So when one reviewer is like, yeah, you got so much variety, but at the end of the day, you're going to build a character that's going to be a singular defined character for who you are. You're going to pick your abilities, which means if you come to the session, yeah, your fighter might be slightly different than that fighter, but at the end of the day, you're doing the same damage value, the same amount of dice, and the GM doesn't really need to worry about it. My worry is that sometimes a GM is a bit of a referee, and he usually has to be so experienced in players, he has to be able to spot when a player is cheating. And one of the things I got annoyed with playing certain tabletop games is that there were so many customized rules that I couldn't catch my opponent's player cheating by saying you couldn't do that because I know that system. But now there's so much variety, it's impossible to catch them in a lie. So that might be an issue with dungeon masters, where I say to them, it's like, you know what, don't worry about players tweaking the rules. If they want to do it, let the other players referee them.
But that's the thing, and I'm going to intercede in there. One of the reasons why I stopped playing D&D with my group is that because they were completely new to D&D, they had massive problems getting to grips with the amount of data that they had to process. Like spells, for instance, and how many rules. And because the adventure that we were playing, which was the Dragonlance, you advanced very quickly. They literally didn't have from 1 week to the next enough time to see and take a look at all the spells that they could use with and for their characters. If this new player's handbook has even more spells, there's going to be an overload of people who will become completely and utterly overwhelmed by that level of information. And as you said, they're just going to go for the 5-6 basic spells that they're going to be able to remember very quickly, and that's going to be it. So I don't understand the trend of more is more. No, I'm sorry, but less is less. And again, I get the feeling that the character creation, because they have given so much variety, they've also complicated it a lot more because before you could choose one background, and that, as you said, they give you everything you need to know. You don't have to worry. Now you have to learn everything, read everything, understand everything, so you know exactly what kind of character you want to make. To me, that's not attractive. I don't have time to do all those things anymore. So
I worry that you're right. Like that was like when I was doing 4th edition stuff, I was getting criticized for giving people too much variety, too much freedom. And Ultramodern has also been accused of being overly complex because it offers too much freedom. I go, well, is that the lesson that Hasbro has learned in making the largest player's handbook that they've made? I'll know for certain on Thursday when I get through and I flip through it. Now, from my perspective, there are a few things. Like I said, there are origin feats, so everyone gets a feat. The human is now the variant human, which I think is one of the off books. It's the human has been changed, so it's now a different type of version of human. That's fine. And then we have these origin feats that everybody gets. There's more variety in ability score benefits. So so there's definitely they've tweaked, but ultimately I think the classes when you have a first level character, your hit points will still be the same. If monsters come out and they are fundamentally mechanically different, that's the only thing that's going to worry me, is that they'll come out with a mechanically different way. Because they did that with 4th edition. People don't realize that 4th edition came out with a new set of how monsters worked right near the end of 4th edition's life, when they were trying to retweak 4th edition to be a bit more acceptable. They came out with the Essentials, which basically turned 4th edition into a 3rd edition, 4th edition hybrid. I actually thought it was really good, but a lot of people hated it. And around that same time, they came out with Monster Manual, I think it was 3. And they actually went and changed how monsters worked. They played around with how the numbers looked. They tweaked it around. It was still mechanically the same, but they presented them differently. And I'm really worried that they're going to try to create a situation where they're going to present monsters differently in order to create things where people are going to get used to the 2024 visual style. And when they see a 5e style, they may go, well, I don't understand. This is not presented the way. And the hilarious thing is that the monsters presented in Monster Manual 3 for 4th edition were easier to understand. But by then, it was just too late. The other big thing with with the 2024 Player's Handbook is it apparently is beautiful. It is the nicest looking book that Hasbro has ever published. It has more artwork and more color artwork than has ever been seen. Some people have actually criticized, saying this book is so beautiful, it's almost got too much. Like every class gets a full page illustration. Backgrounds have full illustrations. It's so pretty. Without some people criticizing that the images some of them look very digital, that they don't really have a look of being an illustration. And there's even some that they have an almost Norman Rockwell type of appearance, where you're seeing people around a dinner table eating dinner and stuff like that. And someone's just like, well, I want the illustrations to be bombastic and creative and destructive. And I'm like, well, no, an illustration is an illustration. If it conveys an idea, I don't care what it is. So I'll be really looking forward to seeing how pretty this game is. And I'm hoping people don't think that that's the baseline for all games to follow. Because we used to have that when 3rd edition came out. A lot of games felt they had to up their budgets to make their games look as good as the 3.5 books. And then we saw a rash of beautiful looking role-playing games that were making a lot of money, but then a whole bunch of companies went out of business because the art budgets were insane.
I think they've missed out on an opportunity to call it D&DDE. They should have called, judging for what you're saying with how beautiful it is, I think they should just call this thing Dungeons and Dragons Definitive Edition.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the pinnacle of what D&D can produce, and the next D&D in another 15, 20 years time will be something completely different. So everyone has time to prepare for the next edition's war, which I reckon this time is not going to happen.
Well, I find you actually hit the nail on the head with that, because if this version of D&D is now, like, by putting out a version that is simply a 5th edition with more bells and whistles and more options, they've basically kicked the bucket down another 7 or 8 years before they could do an actual 6th edition, because they're still calling this 5th edition, 2024. They're saying the rules, and people have stressed who read that this is 100% backwards compatible. The rules, you can have characters from 5.5 and 5th edition together, and you wouldn't notice the difference. And if that's true, that means we're not going to see a 6th edition until probably 2030, because obviously they're going to try to keep this going this way for a while. And supposedly, when the Monster Manual comes out next year, DMG comes out in November, Monster Manual comes out next year, they are going to be adding in the majority of the content from the Player's Handbook into the Creative Commons rules, supposedly. Somebody was saying that they have plans to do that, which means if you're like, oh, do I want to buy this DMG? I go, well, won't matter. It's going to hit Creative Commons in about 6 months. And the other thing I thought was interesting, and this is something else we got to comment, which is a bit upsetting, is how cheap this game is.
How you mean? How much is the book?
Well, in US prices, it's $49. Right now, the Canadian price is on sale for $56. It's about $16 off.
That's weird. I thought they were going to put the prices up. They were going to sell this for $60 American, US dollars.
It is, yeah, 55 Canadian, 49 US for a 380, 300. I don't know. It's in the 300. It's in the mid 300s. It should be noted that my game, which is about the same length, it's a bigger. My most successful game with Ultramodern is $10 over. No, it's $15 more expensive. So that's the other thing. People are going to look like, well, why your game is so expensive? But the Player's Handbook is $49. I go, I would imagine that beyond the fact that they've probably are doing a 20 million print run with their printer.
Exactly. I was going to say, if you could print a couple of million books, I bet you could lower the price considerably.
Yeah, you can do that. And considering with their art budgets and all that, they're probably only making $1. They're making very little per purchase, because they're for them, it's about trying to get more people into D&D, and they're doing that by throwing everything to the stick, which brings up talking about the other thing, which Sigil is their...
Wait a second. Wait, stop. Because we've been 15 minutes talking about this, let's jump on Sigil on the next part of the podcast.
Okay.